Pokemon. A franchise that's been firmly rooted into the minds of kids and those, myself included, that grew up with it since its very beginnings. Over the last 24 years, the franchise has had a plethora of tie-in products come and go, from the ThinkChip toy line to the Master Trainer board games, collectible figurines, and of course, various spin-off game titles. However, there are some that have so long fallen into obscurity, not too many fans even knew they existed. And today, we're going to be taking a look at one of them. I'm the MediaNutso, and this is the story of the Pokemon Learning League. Now, let's kick things off by answering the question I'm sure many of you are asking: what the heck was the Pokemon Learning League? Well, if you didn't already guess from the title, it was an educational website that ran from September of 2006 to August of 2009, aimed mainly toward upper elementary and early junior high school students, covering 140 lessons across the four main subjects: math, science, life skills, and language arts. Also, 4 exclusive characters, known collectively as the Mission Guides, were created to cover each main subject matter: Ciara for science, Ada for math, Quinn for life skills, and Lex for language arts, to which the characters were called off via an exclusive website gadget known as the PokePilot. Now, while the thought of Pokemon having an educational product might seem a bit off-putting, it should be noted that this was not the first nor the last time they would delve into the realm of education. 6 years prior, they collaborated with the Learning Company, makers of the classic game series Reader Rabbit and the Clue Finders, to make the Pokemon diskettes, which had math-related puzzles and games. And 2 years after the site's closure, Japan would see the release of Learning with Pokemon, Typing Adventure, where you basically went around catching Pokemon by correctly typing out their names. Yes, really. And it's about as thoroughly as one might expect from a title like that. Anyways, one aspect that made the website unique among all the tie-in products was that this was one of the very few anime tie-ins. Of course, the show is no stranger to having tie-ins of its own, from specials, toys and clothes that featured Ash and his friends, the Pokemon Puzzle League for the Nintendo 64, and some special promo trading cards. But what made the website stand out was that it was one of the only American-made tie-ins. Now, the plot structure of each episode, which are all non-canon by the way, were virtually the same. Characters have a problem related to a specific topic, they contact that respective mission guide, who then teaches them about said topic, and then implement their newly gained information to solve the problem at the end. Lather, rinse, repeat. Each episode was broken up into 3 parts: Watch, where they introduce the characters or character and their problem; Try, where you do a guided practice run along with them; and Apply, where you essentially apply what you learned through a minigame and it concludes with the characters solving their problem. As for the plots themselves, they were rather corny and mundane, like Ash and Brock having trouble pitching up a tent, Ash not knowing how to pass a fair review for a contest, Brock having trouble befriending other girls, yes really.
Hey. Well, hello there. Hi. Excuse me, miss.
Or Dawn wanting to write a summary of her then current adventures to her mom. Yeah, very riveting sounding, huh? Now, all joking aside, there were a few notable episodes. Media, for being the only 2-part story, the Water Cycle, for introducing Dawn, Magnetism, for marking one of the few tons of mission guide, Ciara needed help, the Lunar Cycle, for being the very first lesson ever made, and etc, etc. Another noteworthy aspect, it featured Ash and company region hopping from episode to episode, much like what the Sword and Shield anime is currently doing. So you'd have one episode where Ash, May, Max, and Brock are visiting Misty and Cerulean City, and in another, they're visiting Goldenrod. On top of that, there were some that only focused on just 1 or 2 characters without Ash and Pikachu being there, or even get a mention. That's right, there were a few that focused on just Dawn, Brock, Misty, May, and even Tracy, So to any fanboy who wanted to see more adventures of them outside of the side story specials, this site was doing it well over a decade ago. Now, considering that this was an educational website, that meant it wasn't allowed to feature any sort of Pokemon battle, with only one exception. The only real compensation for it, if you can even call it one, was by having some of the plots revolve around the gang either coming off of or going to a battle, or in some cases, preparing for an upcoming contest, even if we don't get to see the outcome of those competitions at the very end.
I've heard that coordinators will be showing off some excellent moves, and I know you two will be terrific.
Yeah, now's as good a time as any to address the elephant in the room. As you have no doubt noticed, Dawn's outfit has been altered slightly, and the animation isn't exactly the most stellar. But for its time, it was considered passable, especially when you consider the kind of schedule the crew working on this had to do to get these episodes done on time. I'll get in more on those later. During its original run, the site received strong praise from parents and teachers alike, saying that they loved how it was able to get kids to learn in a fun way, and that the lessons were interesting and engaging. Even the crew was excited about the reception, so much so they later forged a partnership with the Virginia Department of Education to prove how effective it was, since at the time, Virginia was very well ahead of the country in terms of educational tech. Naturally, that success would go on to earn the site 14 awards, including but not limited to a Bessie Award in the category of multi-subject website for upper elementary, an AEP Distinguished Achievement Award, 2 SIIA Cody Awards, an iParenting Media Award, and even earned the National Parenting Center's seal of approval. My, not too shabby for a Pokemon-related product. As for how many yearly subscribers it got, well, that's completely unknown. See, Pokemon New York never actually disclosed the actual number, so I can only estimate that it was probably around the 20 to 30,000 range. Also, keep this in mind. This was back before sites like abcmouse.com were even a thing. The only other educational site around was BrainPop, which this site did take some inspiration from. It was still a relatively new concept, so no one knew if it would be effective or not, which, as the aforementioned awards have shown, it ultimately proved to be. That, and the fact that it didn't get a whole lot of marketing, nor did it stay online long enough to gain any sort of foothold in the market. So, who knows how much of an impact the website would have had if it was still online to this day. Well, we can only imagine. Okay, so now that we've covered what the website was about, it's time to get into the history of where and how it came into existence. Surprisingly, the idea for the website actually came from the CEO of Pokemon Japan, Tsunekazu Ishihara. While there is not much known about when or why he got the idea, it's most likely that he wanted to expand on the franchise's horizons. And unfortunately, that's about all I've got for this segment. Now to really pick things up, let's get into who they hired to bring this project to life. Enter the then executive 360 kid, Scott Traylor. While speaking at an educational conference in 2004, Traylor would meet up with another attendee, who suggested to him that one day they should work together on a project. Little would he know that said person were going to be hired by Pokemon New York to develop an educational website for them. Jumping forward a bit 2 years later, and Pokemon is in the midst of celebrating its 10th anniversary, along with the release of Pokemon Chose for the Nintendo DS. However, despite all this celebration, there were many big changes that were simultaneously occurring behind the scenes, most namely with the Pokemon anime. The show had been removed from the Kids WB block after 8 seasons, would begin exclusively airing new seasons on Cartoon Network for a full decade before moving over to Disney XD, and perhaps the biggest and most controversial change of all, the production of the anime's English dub would move over from 4Kids Entertainment to Pokemon USA in-house in an effort to lower production costs. I won't be covering here, but suffice it to say, this change really did not sit well with a lot of fans. Anywho, back onto the website, during the beginning of its development, Pokemon New York would select 3 companies to create one ed video, among them 360 Kid. Out of the 3 candidates, 360 Kid would ultimately be the ones chosen, due to them having, at the time, the best audio recording, animation, character development, and educational content writing. When the crew got the news, you better believe they were quite excited about it. I mean, after all, Who wouldn't be excited about working with Pokemon? Afterwards, Pokemon New York would ask them to make 12 Ed video episodes, to which one of their contacts would give them a list of topics to work with. Thus, they went ahead with the educational research and writing process that would later be sent to their contacts at Pokemon New York for approval. Later on, that number would double to 24, then it would go up again to 40. Geez, talk about a heavy workload! At the start of production, 360 Kid had only one producer managing the whole project, and since it proved to be so big, especially since it launched with 40 Ed videos, they had to bring on board a full-time associate producer shortly afterwards. Also, their team consisted of only 12 people, working in shifts having to do one new Ed video every week. Now, if you've been paying attention to the Learning League clips, you may have noticed one element is missing from them.
Hello, Officer Jenny. What's going on?
I'm here to check the lake's water level. It hasn't rained for a very long time.
There's no background music playing in them. Why is that? Well, the crew did initially compose a score that would have been very Pokemon-esque. But during the testing, the teachers found it to be too loud and distracting, so they removed it from the final product. Also, at that same testing, they weren't too keen on Misty's short skirt either, so the crew had to change it to be more of a short pants skirt. This in turn explains why they altered Dawn's outfit when she was later introduced. Honestly, it was probably for the best because you could imagine those teachers would have had a field day with the site if they had kept her outfit as it was on the show. Anyways, the team's goal for the site was to turn out one new Ed video every 6 weeks, but that would prove to be a bit of a challenge. See, they initially planned for each episode to be around 3 minutes long, but as they quickly found out, some of the lessons took a little longer to break down than others. Thus, the more complex the topic was, the longer it took to complete one Ed video. In fact, they had to speed up production so much, their storyboards went from being beautiful renderings to just stick figures by the end. Not even joking about that. Also, all of the work for the backend database was developed by Entropy Multimedia. As for the animation process itself, it was most certainly a unique one. They had one full-time animator complete a minute's worth of animation in just a week. This is why the final animation looks as it does on the site. Oh, and also, they intentionally left off the shading and casting shadows as it would have slowed the production down. As I mentioned earlier, the site wasn't allowed to showcase any battles. However, it is worth noting that this decision actually came from Pokemon New York themselves. Heck, at one point, the 360 Kid crew nearly turned down the entire project as they thought the battles would be included. But Pokemon New York guaranteed them that they would not be included whatsoever. This was good for both them and especially for Pokemon's PR, since this was around the time several schools were banning a lot of Pokemon products from being seen on campuses, including t-shirts and backpacks. That showed just how much of a negative stance schools had for the franchise around that time. But once the website came around, those stances changed and they began to revoke the bans. One notable aspect I like to add is that the cyberbullying and online safety episodes were made due to a mandate from the US Department of Education. But the result of this was that more schools were actually taking notice of the website, since no other educational company at the time offered to cover those topics. That just showed how much ingenuity the crew had for the website. Also, the team had to rework and rewrite some of the Ed videos in order to correlate the educational material to certain state standards, as each one had varying standards on some of the topics taught. On a side note, the team wanted to include a gaming mechanic, e.g. earning a coin or points each time one completed a lesson, and even offered t-shirt iron-ons, which never came to be except for the point mechanic, that was added later in the run. So, with the site's overall positive reception and the recognition it was receiving, why did it close down in the first place? Well, this was due to a change in management at Pokemon New York. See, the then new CEO of the company wasn't too keen on the idea of Pokemon having an educational product, so we decided to pull the plug on it. This, of course, was met with a lot of resistance from the people at 360 Kid and even Pokemon New York, but it did no good and the site was ultimately closed down. Had the website continued on, the crew actually wanted to take it in a more socially emotional direction, teaching about good friendship tips and learning to be kinder, but with a more Japanese approach. Honestly, it's kind of sad. The site still had a lot of untapped potential, but alas, it was never given the opportunity to fully blossom. However, that is not the end of the story. Following the site's closure, all of its assets were sold off to Paws Inc., the makers of Garfield, and it was relaunched as the Infinite Learning Lab. There's not much to say about it really. It's basically the same site, just with Garfield in place of Pokemon. This version's been going on for at least a decade, and it will unfortunately be offline long after this video has been uploaded. In conclusion, the Pokemon Learning was a flawed but overall enjoyable website. The plots were very samey and some of the dialogue could get corny, but it did its job well, and it was nice to see Pokemon stepping outside of its comfort zone for once. If you're curious, I recommend reading it up on Bulbapedia, as well as looking up the few clips that have surfaced on YouTube to help you get an idea of what the website was like. And with that, we come to the end of our story. I hope you all enjoyed this video and that it helped give you an insight into one of the most interesting lost Pokemon paraphernalia out there. Thank you. If you'd like to see more videos, then click on that subscribe button, and don't forget to click that little bell icon.